Research Officer at TheInfoPro. Going to be doing this presentation today on cloud computing. It's supposed to start at 11:15. I wanted to give a chance for a few people to come in, and I realize we're going to be a little bit short of time because we only have 45 minutes, and I'm hoping to be able to do questions on this. Not sure if we're going to be able to do that. At least on the phone, but we will be able to do it over the chat. So, first of all, I'd just like to confirm if somebody can just send me a note on the chat that you guys can hear me out there. There wasn't a moderator. I just want to make sure that we're actually live here. Okay, great. Somebody piped in. Great, loud and clear. Okay, great. We'll get going then. I can check the first box there. We did this right. So, again, my name is Andrew Lofgren. I'm the Chief Research Officer at TheInfoPro. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the current and future state of infrastructure cloud computing. Just a little bit about TheInfoPro if you're not familiar with us. We're basically an independent research network for the IT industry, and we do things a little bit differently than perhaps other research firms in the sense that our primary business is in quantitative primary research. What we do is interview Fortune 1000 and MSC decision makers, IT decision makers in several different technology areas to understand what technologies they're using, which technologies they're adopting, what they're planning to use in the future, spending, which vendors they're playing with, what they think of those vendors, and other topics such as that. And what we call that is basically voice of the customer. So it's quantitatively based. We have over 1,000 of the world's largest IT buyers from those companies within our research network. And today we basically cover storage, service, networking, information and security, cloud computing, and we're doing stuff on virtualization as well. Server virtualization we've been doing for some time, and then we're going to be getting into desktop virtualization as well. But what we're going to talk today about is on cloud computing. The data I'm going to be presenting, because most of what I'm going to be presenting here today is going to be data, is from our current cloud computing study that actually has not entirely been completed yet, but very close to it. So we have some data here, and I'll also use some data that I might mention that's not in the slide from our other studies. Interestingly enough, in the other sectors that we cover, we've been asking about cloud computing for some time. So, for example, in our server practice, we've been asking server pros about what they think about cloud computing. Are you looking at it? Are you using it? Is it internal? Is it external? Who are you looking at? What's the time frame? So on and so forth. Same thing in security, where it's been more about, what are you concerned about security when your company moves to cloud computing? In networking, what are the implications of moving towards cloud computing, again, whether it's internal or external for networking, and then in storage, similar type of questions. But what we did last year was to start basically a practice that's specifically focused on cloud computing. And so just on page 3 here, I flipped to slide number 3. Some of the things that we found so far, some of the stuff will not be a surprise to a lot of you. Some of it might be. I think the first thing, which certainly was not a surprise to me, having been doing this for a while, is can't get anybody to agree on a generally agreed upon definition of cloud computing. And I think first of all, you'll get the question about cloud computing. Is it, what are you talking about? The internal or external? Well, what's the definition of internal? What's the definition of external? I've had people I've talked to who says, well, we're basically outsourcing, so isn't that really cloud computing? And in some cases the answer is yes, some cases the answer is no. And I think there's just still a lot of questions about that. And in fact, in the study we actually had a question where we outlined several definitions of cloud computing, and then ask people to agree or disagree, or strongly disagree or strongly agree to the statement. And what we found was, again, not so surprising, I guess, is it was really all over the map, and everybody's got different definitions. Well, what does that really tell us? What that tells us is that there's still a lot of confusion in the marketplace, still a lot of education that needs to take place. You know, with the IT organizations. At the same time, I think some of the education that perhaps that the vendors have been doing actually causes the confusion. Each vendor is creating a definition of cloud computing that best suits their needs. Not surprising necessarily, but I think that what happens then is end users, not that they get necessarily confused, but they're hearing very different definitions from different parties, and nobody can seem to agree upon it. And I think eventually that's something that's going to have to get solved. I understand vendors want to call off names and definitions to suit their needs. Fine, that's been going on since the beginning of time. But at some point I think we need to get to some kind of somewhat common agreed upon definition. One of the other highlights, cloud computing is not a zero-sum game. There isn't necessarily one right approach or one winning model. Today, we mostly separate things by looking at something that's either external or internal, or private or public, depending on what definition we want to use there. In some cases, they're somewhat synonymous. And of course, then we have the hybrid model, which is a combination of the two things. What we have found is that for most organizations, in general, we find a lot of people who are starting off for internal cloud computing and then have plans to go towards external cloud computing. And again, they're starting small and then selectively growing. But what we also found is that we believe at least that internal cloud computing has an approximately 2-year lead on external cloud computing, and I'll show you how we kind of get to that. Now that's a rough estimate. It's based on the adoption plans we saw, and it's based